Opening. Fog in our town moved like a living thing. It rolled over the cornfields and crept between the crooked oaks, filling the low hollows with a muffled silence. The people of Reddick, a small patch of Midwest soil that never made it onto a tourist map, learned to read the fog as if it were an old friend with a secret. Thick and heavy meant storms coming. Thin wisps hugging the ground meant a cold snap. But when the fog clung to the old woods near Walker's Creek and refused to budge, even after the sun clawed its way over the hills, people locked their doors and talked in whispers. They called that place the Hollow, and the Hollow did not like to be disturbed. Growing up in Reddick meant growing up on stories. My friends and I swapped them like baseball cards. There were tales about lights in the sky, about the big cat someone claimed to see near the McMurray farm, about the sound of children laughing when there were no children around. The Hollow sat at the center of them all, a magnet for everything unexplainable. Parents told us to stay away from the trees. Preachers warned that temptation lived in shadows. Older kids dared younger ones to walk the trail at night. Those dares occasionally led to tears, and sometimes to screams that carried over the fields in the dead of autumn. When I say we believed, I don't mean in the same way someone believes in Santa or the Tooth Fairy. I mean that we believed in the way you believe in gravity. It was part of our existence. The Hollow was a fact, like the old white church with its leaning steeple or the grain silos that dominated the skyline. You did not go there after dark, and you did not bring back souvenirs. You certainly did not speak its real name out loud. The new arrival. It was the August I turned 17 that something changed. A moving truck rumbled down Main Street on a Friday morning, kicking up dust and curiosity. By lunch, everybody knew someone was moving into the Blackthorn house. The Blackthorn house sat at the edge of the Hollow, a once grand farmhouse that had been unoccupied since before I was born. 2 stories, wraparound porch, windows shuttered with weathered boards. It had belonged to the Blackthorn family, wealthy farmers who made their money before the Dust Bowl and lost most of it after. People whispered that the last Blackthorn disappeared without a trace one winter, though if you pressed my grandmother, she said the man simply packed his things and left quietly in the night. Either way, the property fell back to the county and sat there, falling in on itself for decades. Now someone was moving in. For days we drove by slowly, craning our necks to see. Men peeled the boards off windows, revealing panes streaked with dirt. A young woman stood on the porch once, hands on her hips, hair pulled into a messy bun. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt despite the heat, and seemed utterly unimpressed by the house's reputation. Mrs. Loomis at the diner said her name was Evelyn, or maybe Everly, and she had come up from somewhere down south. People wondered what kind of person looked at the Blackthorn house and saw potential. It should have been none of my business, but we found ourselves making it our business anyway. We? That would be me, my best friend Nora, my cousin Pete, and a string of people who hovered around us like moths to porch lights. We were restless and bored, stuck between childhood and whatever came next, and the Blackthorn house was the first interesting thing to happen all summer. "She's crazy," Pete said one afternoon as we sat on the hood of his truck, parked behind the fire station, with a view of the road to the Hollow. We watched a pickup truck bouncing down the rutted lane, carrying what looked like a mattress strapped haphazardly with rope. "Or desperate," Nora replied, tracing her finger through the dust on the windshield. She drew a spiral. Nora always drew spirals when she was thinking. as if the shape held the secret to life. You'd have to be desperate to move into that place. My mom says she's probably running from something worse. Maybe she doesn't know, I said. And even as the words left my mouth, they sounded naive. Everyone knew. My grandma once said that the town never forgot a grudge, and the Hollow never forgot a secret. If Evelyn, or Everly, was running, she was running right into the thing most people ran away from. As we watched, a flock of blackbirds lifted out of the trees along the Hollow's edge, their wings beating frantic patterns in the air. They flew toward town, shrieking and scattering feathers. I felt a twinge between my shoulder blades, a pressure that made me sit up straighter. The birds never flew that way. They always stayed within the woods, circling like dark smoke. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were fleeing something we couldn't see. Strange lights. The first night, the fog crept up early. It settled across Reddick like a wet blanket. I lay in bed with my window open, listening to the crickets and the occasional car pass. Around midnight, just as I started to drift off, a humming sound seeped through the night. It was low at first, more like a vibration than a noise, and then it grew in pitch, like a tuning fork being struck and held. I sat up and looked out the window. A faint glow pulsed in the distance toward the Hollow. It was not the cold blue of a television or the warm yellow of a porch light. It was a pale green, sickly but somehow entrancing. It flickered, then steadied, then pulsed again. The hum vibrated through the wooden frame of my bed, thrumming against my bones. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and texted Nora. "Me. Do you hear that?" Her response came almost immediately. "Nora. You see it too?" Me. "I'm not crazy then." Nora. "No more than usual. Meet me. We have to see what it is." My stomach flipped. Part of me wanted to throw the covers over my head and pretend the world outside didn't exist. Another part, the larger part, if I'm being honest, felt the same pull as the faint green light. I slipped on jeans, shoved my feet into sneakers, and crept down the hallway. My parents' door was closed. Faint snores came from behind it. The hum seemed to mask my footsteps. Outside, the air was heavy. The glow was brighter now, rising like a bubble from the treetops. Nora was waiting at the end of my driveway, her hair hidden under a beanie. She looked like a cat, eyes wide in the dark. "We shouldn't," she whispered, even as her feet were already carrying her toward the road. "We won't go far," I lied. Our feet crunched on gravel, the sound swallowed quickly by the fog. As we passed the old Johnson barn, I saw movement in the shadows and nearly jumped out of my skin. Pete stepped into view, a baseball bat slung over one shoulder. "Thought you could leave me out," he said. "Mom's at work and I can't sleep. Figured you'd both be stupid enough to go look." The three of us walked together, following the low hum like mice drawn to a piper's song. As we drew closer, the light grew brighter, spilling between the trees in long, thin beams. The fog glowed an eerie green. The hum changed tone, now layered, as if multiple voices were singing the same note off-key. We stopped at the edge of the Hollow. The line between the road and the woods felt like the line between worlds. My grandma once told me the first step into the Hollow was always the hardest, because you crossed more than dirt. You crossed into the place where things weren't yours. I hesitated. From within the trees came a flitting shadow, tall and thin. It flickered across the green light and then vanished. I blinked. Another shadow moved, this one low to the ground, crawling. A branch snapped. The hum stopped, leaving a thick silence. In that silence, I heard whispering. Not words exactly, but the suggestion of words, like the rustling of paper. Pete tightened his grip on his bat. Nora put her hand on my arm. "We should go," she whispered. I nodded, and we turned away from the green light. As we started to walk back, something behind us exhaled. The breath was cold, curling around our ankles like a stream. In that breath, I swear I heard my name. The Hollow's history. The next morning, the town hummed with speculation. The diner was full by 6 a.m., and all anyone could talk about was the strange glow over the hollow. Some said it was swamp gas. Others blamed teenagers with glow sticks. A man who lived near the creek swore he saw spirits dancing among the trees. My grandma sat by the window in her rocker, sipping her coffee. She'd lived through nearly 80 years of Reddick, seen more than most, and had never been one to buy into tall tales easily. When I told her about the hum and the light, she nodded once and stared into her mug. "The Hollow's been hungry lately," she said. "Feeding it with gossip only makes it hungrier." "Hungry?" I asked, half amused and half scared. She set her cup down and fixed me with a look that brooked no argument. Places can be like people. They can get restless. They can grieve. They can feel when they are disrespected. Her words hung in the air with the smell of coffee. I knew better than to push. She had told me some of the Hollow's stories when I was younger. There was the one about the miners who dug too deep into the hill and found a cavern full of bones they couldn't explain. There was the tale of a boy who vanished for 3 days and returned with white hair and eyes that looked through people. There were older stories, buried under layers of fear and time, about creatures that weren't human and voices that weren't voices at all. Reddick had been founded in the mid-1800s by settlers who wanted fertile land and found more than they bargained for. According to old records, the hollow was always dense, its trees older than the rest. Native peoples had avoided it, calling it a place where the sky touches the deep. When the town built its church, the preacher insisted it stand directly facing the hollow, the steeple pointing like a warning finger. My grandma said her grandmother had told her that the hollow had once held a lake. One day, the water boiled, killing every fish. The next morning, there was a pit where the lake had been, and from that pit came the fog that never entirely left. Places remember, she said. They remember what we forget. The hollow remembers being full. A voice in the woods. Days passed, and the green glow didn't return. We told ourselves we'd been imagining it, that our brains had conjured shapes out of fog. Evelyn, or Everly, kept to herself, driving into town for supplies and nodding politely to those who stared. She moved crates into the Blackthorn house, hung white sheets over second-floor windows, and replaced the old porch swing. The birds didn't come back. One afternoon, as the heat broke and a cool breeze swept across the cornfields, I heard someone call my name. I was sitting on the porch, sorting through a box of old comic books, when the voice floated to me on the wind. It sounded like my mother at first. "Lissa," it said. I looked up. The yard was empty. The dog across the street barked once and went silent. I returned to my comics. Again, the voice. Lissa. Soft, sing-song. I stood and went to the porch steps. "Mom?" I called. No answer. "Lissa!" the voice insisted. It was not coming from inside. It drifted from the road that led to the hollow. A prickle ran down my spine. Logic warred with instinct. Logic said I was hearing things. Instinct said someone or something knew my name. I walked to the gate and looked down the road. The dust hung in the air. The trees were still. A patch of shade moved and resolved into a figure standing at the curve where the road dipped out of sight. It was a woman in a dress that fluttered like leaves. I couldn't see her face clearly, but her hair hung long and dark. She raised her hand in a gesture that could have been a wave or a beckoning. "Lissa!" she called again, and this time I realized the voice did not belong to anyone I knew. It was layered, as if several mouths spoke at once. I took a step back. The woman lowered her arms slowly, like a clock pendulum, her head tilted. Then, as if someone had blown on dandelion fluff, her body broke into thin tendrils of fog and scattered across the road. The dust settled. Silence returned. I slammed the gate and ran back inside. My heart hammered so hard my ribs hurt. For the rest of the day, I didn't go near the windows. That night, I dreamed of standing in the hollow, roots coiling around my ankles, while a chorus of voices murmured my name from the trees. The Old Diary. The next week, it rained for 3 straight days, a steady drizzle that turned the dirt roads to mush. Reddick slowed to a crawl. The farmers couldn't get into the fields. The diner served more coffee than food. At my house, we played cards until the deck wore thin, and I read books I'd forgotten I owned. On the 4th day, the rain broke, leaving the air thick and clean. Nora came over with something wrapped in a grocery bag. She slipped into my room and shut the door behind her. "You're not going to believe what I found," she said, her eyes shining. She unwrapped the bag and pulled out a leather-bound book, swollen from moisture and age. The cover was cracked, but still held a faint, embossed pattern. A brittle strap kept it shut. "Where did you get that?" I whispered. "My dad's attic," she said. "He was cleaning out some boxes from my great-aunt's stuff, and this was in there. When I asked him about it, he told me to throw it away. He looked weird, Lissa. I couldn't just toss it." We sat on my floor and opened the strap carefully. The pages smelled like earth and old rain. The handwriting was spidery, ink faded, but legible. On the first page, someone had written a date, August 3rd, 1938. The diary belonged to a girl named Miriam. Her first entry described walking to the hollow with her younger brother to pick blackberries. She wrote about the heat and the way the crows watched from the branches. She mentioned hearing humming in the trees. They say not to go past the 3rd oak, but Tommy did. And when we came home, Mama scolded us. Tommy says he saw a man made of leaves. I think he's telling stories. Nora and I exchanged glances. A man made of leaves. That didn't sound like the stories we'd heard, but also did. We flipped through more pages. Miriam wrote about feeding the chickens, about the first frost, about attending church, and hearing the preacher talk about sin. Then the entries changed. September 16th, 1938. The fog didn't lift this morning. Papa says we must stay in. It makes the animals nervous. I heard voices whispering my name from the hollow last night. I told Mama. She told me to pray. October 2nd, 1938, Papa went to the hollow with 3 other men. They came back pale and shaking. They won't say what they saw. Papa burned his clothes in the yard. Mama cried behind the barn. October 12th, 1938. Pastor Gaines says the hollow is cursed. He says people are seeing things because Satan is near. I don't think that's right. The hollow was here before Satan. Today I saw someone in the woods. I called out, thinking it was Sarah from church. But the person turned. and it had my face. The entry stopped abruptly on October 13th, 1938, with a single sentence. "The hollow is not hollow." We sat in silence, the weight of the words pressing on us. Nora closed the diary gently and wrapped it back in the bag. "We have to find out what happened," she said. "Do we?" I asked, feeling dread coil in my stomach. "Maybe some things are better left alone." Nora shook her head. "We're already part of it. We saw the light. You heard the voice. My great-aunt never mentioned this diary. Why did my dad want to get rid of it? What are they hiding?" I couldn't argue with her logic. The hollow had moved into our lives whether we liked it or not. Pretending ignorance wouldn't change that. And maybe, just maybe, understanding would give us some control. The ritual. After another night when the humming returned and the green light throbbed above the trees, Evelyn pounded on our door at 2 in the morning. She was barefoot, hair tangled, eyes wild. "The walls are breathing," she whispered. "They're saying my name." We bundled her inside and let her sleep on our couch, the memory of thin figures between studs haunting her. She insisted it was temporary and that she'd find a way to fix the house. Each day she drove to the Blackthorn property, opened the door, and stood on the porch. She never went inside. The weeks that followed blurred together. Meanwhile, the town busied itself with harvest festivals and school events, as if ignoring the hollow would make it less present. People carved pumpkins, hung corn stalks, and told ghost stories that ended with laughter rather than uneasy glances. Nora and I couldn't let it go. We met in secret, reading more of the diaries and letters we found at the library. We discovered patterns. Every 20 or 30 years, people vanished. Strange lights appeared. The fog refused to lift. In 1907, the pastor wrote about hearing singing from under the ground. In 1962, a teenage boy scratched a note in the margin of a library book. "It watches." We pieced together a theory that made as much sense as anything else. Something in the hollow fed on attention and fear. When people looked away, it grew hungry. When people told stories, it woke up. The Blackthorn house, perched on its edge, was its doorway. "We have to close the door," Nora said one afternoon, the diary open between us. "If we can't move Evelyn out, maybe we can shut whatever's coming through." "How?" I asked. "Do you know any door-closing spells?" "Not spells," she said, "but rituals. My grandmother had books. When someone died, she covered mirrors. That's a ritual. When a baby is born, we bury the cord under the hearth. That's a ritual. Maybe there's something like that for places." We visited her grandmother, a woman with sharp eyes and a house full of herbs. She listened as we talked, her face unreadable. When we finished, she stood and walked to a cabinet. She pulled out a small, worn book and flipped through it. "You're talking about binding," she said. "Old practice. Dangerous if done wrong. It's not magic like in movies. It's more like a promise. You make a promise with the land. You tell it what you will give if it leaves you alone." She traced her finger down the page. "To bind a restless place, you need earth from within it, something from yourself, something that belongs to it, and witnesses. You bury the items at the boundary during the liminal time, dawn or dusk." "What do we give?" I asked. She looked up. "Often blood, sometimes hair. You promise a part of yourself. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it takes more." My stomach dropped. "If we don't try, it will keep happening," Nora said quietly. "More people will get hurt." We debated for hours, weighing fear against fear. In the end, we decided to try. It felt reckless and brave and stupid all at once. Pete insisted on helping, despite our protests. "If you're going into the hollow, I'm not letting you go alone," he said. "Besides, I'm the only one with a truck." We gathered what we needed, dirt from within the hollow. Pete dug a handful from just past the third oak. Locks of our hair tied together with twine, the feather-turned leaf that had appeared on my nightstand, and a piece of the blackthorn house. Evelyn reluctantly pried a splinter from the old front door. We planned to meet at dawn, when the night was fading and the day wasn't fully born. The morning of the ritual, the fog was thick and cold. We parked at the end of the road and walked quietly, our breaths visible in the dim light. The trees loomed overhead, branches intertwining like fingers. The hum was faint but present, a low thrumming in our bones. At the boundary between the road and the hollow, we stopped. Nora read the words from her grandmother's book, voice steady. We stand between what was and what will be. We offer pieces of ourselves to bind what is restless. Let the door close. Let the peace return. We dug a small hole at the foot of the third oak. Nora placed the dirt from the hollow in first, then the hair, then the leaf, then the splinter. Each item looked insignificant on its own. Together, they felt like a promise. We covered them with earth and pressed our hands on top, whispering words from the book. The fog swirled. The hum grew louder, then softened. For a moment, everything stilled. Then the ground under our palms vibrated. A cold shock shot through my fingers up my arms. I gasped and jerked back. Pete swore. Nora clenched her jaw. The vibration ceased as quickly as it began. We waited, hearts pounding. The fog thinned slightly. The hum faded. A bird chirped somewhere in the trees. "Did it work?" Pete whispered. "I don't know," Nora said, voice shaking. We did what it said. We turned to leave. As we stepped onto the road, a figure stepped from behind a tree. It was Evelyn. She wore jeans and boots, her hair in a ponytail, eyes bright. "What are you doing here?" I asked, startled. She smiled slowly, and the expression chilled me. It didn't reach her eyes. Her body moved like smoke, fluid and unnatural. "I've been waiting," she said, but her voice was layered, not hers alone. It sounded like Miriam. It sounded like the whispers. "Thank you for the offering." We stumbled back, realization crashing over us. The thing in the hollow didn't want us to leave. It wanted us to bring pieces of ourselves willingly. It had used Evelyn's face to get us here. The figure tilted its head. "The door was never open," it whispered. "You were." Echoes. We ran. Branches slapped our faces. Roots caught our feet. Behind us, the whispering rose in a cacophony. I could hear names. My name, Nora's, Pete's, Evelyn's, spoken over and over. We burst onto the road and didn't stop until we reached the truck. Pete jammed the key into the ignition and drove, tires skidding on wet gravel. My hands shook so badly I couldn't buckle my seatbelt. Nora stared out the back window, eyes wide, as if expecting to see the figure following. We didn't talk until we were miles from the hollow. We pulled over near the old feed store, chest heaving. "It tricked us," Pete said, voice hoarse. "It was never about a door. It wanted us to invite it." "But why?" Nora whispered. Tears tracked down her cheeks. "Why us? We're nobodies." "Maybe that's why," I said. "It doesn't care who. It just wants a story to be told. The more we talk about it, the more people listen, the stronger it gets." The realization settled coldly. The hollow fed on attention. It fed on fear and fascination. By trying to bind it, we had played into its hands. We went to my house, where Evelyn still slept on our couch. She looked up as we entered, eyes weary. "You went there," she said. It wasn't a question. "It used you," I said quietly. "It used your face. We thought we saw you." Evelyn's expression crumpled. "It knows what to show you. That's how it keeps you. That's why people don't leave. They think they can fix it. They think they can understand. But it's a hole. You pour yourself in, and it stays empty." "What do we do?" Nora asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Evelyn looked at us, at the town outside our window, at the fog creeping along the ground. "We leave," she said. "We don't tell anyone else about it. We don't feed it anymore. We go where it can't follow." My parents protested. They argued about jobs and money and roots. But deep down, they knew something had shifted. You can live near a sleeping bear if you are quiet. But once it wakes, staying becomes foolish. 2 weeks later, our house was on the market. Evelyn left the same day we did, her car packed with everything she owned. Nora's family moved a month after. Pete stayed. His family's farm was their entire life, and leaving meant losing everything. When I hugged him goodbye, his eyes were wet. "Right," he said. "Tell me what it's like out there." Final whisper. We settled in a town 3 states away with no fog and no stories about humming trees. The night sounds were different. Sirens in the distance, dogs barking in backyards. Sometimes I missed the crickets and the smell of corn. But I didn't miss the way the hollow watched. Nora and I started over. We went to a new school where nobody knew our names. Evelyn rented a small apartment and started a job at a cafe, her laughter coming more easily as weeks passed. We didn't talk about the hollow often. When we did, it was in hushed tones, as if the wind might carry the words back. One evening, months later, I found a package on our doorstep. There was no return address, just my name scrawled in familiar handwriting. Inside was the diary. Miriam's diary. I flipped to the last page. The words that had been there before. "The hollow is not hollow," were gone. In their place was a single line I hadn't written. "Thank you for listening." My hands trembled. I closed the diary and took it to the backyard. I dug a hole and buried it, pressing the earth down hard. As I stood, the wind brushed against my cheek, and in it, I thought I heard a voice. Soft, layered, familiar. It said my name, just once, stretching the sound like taffy. I didn't look back. Some doors should stay unopened. Some stories should end. Others, like this one, keep whispering long after you think they're done. And now, as you listen to me tell it, as the words settle in your mind, remember, the hollow feeds on attention. Maybe it's listening still. Maybe it's waiting for you.